A rich female CEO proposed to a single father in front of an entire room, and she did it like she was placing an order. The ballroom was all crystal and candlelight. Johannesburg's most powerful people in their finest clothes. And in the middle of it, at a table near the edge of the room, a man in work clothes sat very still, while a woman in a red dress slid a printed document across the table toward him. She didn't whisper it. She didn't lean in. She said it clearly enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "I need a strong father for my sons, and you need money. I think we can help each other." The room went quiet, the way rooms go quiet when something crosses a line. The man looked at the document. He didn't touch it, didn't flinch. Just looked at it with the kind of stillness that doesn't come from weakness. It comes from practice, from a very specific kind of discipline that takes years to build and a lifetime to understand. The sports journalist 4 feet away stopped breathing because he noticed something nobody else in that room noticed. The man's hands folded on the table, the scars across the knuckles. The way his posture shifted when he looked up. Not anger, not humiliation. Something older than both. Like a door closing on something enormous. The CEO saw a man who fixed appliances for a living. She saw a convenient solution to a problem she'd priced out and was ready to close. She had no idea what she had just put a price tag on. If you believe that real strength doesn't announce itself, stay with this story. Because what happens next will make you question everything you think you know about power, worth, and what a quiet man is truly capable of. Before we go further, hit subscribe and drop a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought they already knew your value? But you understand what that journalist recognized, and what Serena Harlan would spend the next 4 months trying to recover from. We need to go back to the beginning, to a repair shop in Brixton, and the man who opened it before dawn every morning, and never once told anyone who he used to be. The shop opened before the sun did. Daniel Osei unlocked the front door at 5:40 in the morning, the way he did every weekday, the way he had done for 7 years. The street outside was still gray and cool. Brixton did not wake quickly. It stretched itself slowly, like something old and comfortable that had earned the right to move at its own pace. He set his bag on the workbench and turned on the single overhead light. The bulb was warm and yellow, and slightly too dim for careful work. But he had learned to compensate. He knew this bench the way he knew his own hands. Every scratch in the wood, every drawer that stuck in the wet season. He flicked on the small transistor radio on the shelf above the bench. A voice spoke low and steady about the weather. He turned it down until it was just company, not noise. The first 2 customers came before 8. A man with a blender that shook violently on its base. A teenager with a phone charger that sparked. Daniel worked without hurrying. Each problem had a solution. You found it by being patient and looking carefully and not assuming you knew the answer before you had examined the thing. He believed this about most things in life, not just broken appliances. Amara arrived at 2:30, school bag hitting the floor with the specific enthusiasm of a child who considers the school day a temporary inconvenience between more important things. She was 11, and she moved through spaces the way water moves through cracks, finding the gaps, filling them, comfortable everywhere. She dropped into the high stool behind the back counter, pulled out a textbook, and began her homework without being asked. This was their arrangement. It had never been discussed. It simply was. She worked quietly while he worked. The radio murmured. Outside, the afternoon traffic on Brixton's main road built and thinned and built again. At 4:15, the door opened and Mrs. Delamony came in. She was 71 years old, and she had been coming to the shop since Daniel opened it. She carried a standing fan with both arms, her handbag looped over one elbow, moving with the careful dignity of someone who refused to ask for help. Daniel crossed the shop and took the fan from her before she reached the counter. "The motor," she said. "It makes a sound now. I'll look at it." How much? I'll look at it first. She sat in the single plastic chair he kept near the door for waiting customers. Amara glanced up from her textbook, looked at Mrs. Delamini, looked at her father, and looked back down. She had seen this before. The fan needed a new bearing. It took Daniel 25 minutes. He wrote the receipt by hand. When Mrs. Delamini opened her wallet, he told her the number, and she counted it out carefully. The number was half of what it should have been. He did not explain the discount, and she did not question it. She thanked him and carried the fan out, her handbag back over her elbow. Amara waited until the door closed. "You did it again," she said. "Did what?" "The price thing." Daniel set the receipt book on the shelf. Her motor was easy. Amara looked at him the way she sometimes did, a long, flat look that said she understood exactly what he was doing and did not entirely disapprove, but wanted it acknowledged. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded flyer. "This was on the board at the gym," she said. "Junior tournament. 3 weeks." He took it from her. "Read it." The Regional Youth Circuit. Under 12 Division. He had seen the previous 2 she had placed in both. He walked to the wall beside the bench, where a strip of corkboard held invoices and reminders and one hand-drawn map Amara had made of Brixton streets when she was 8. He pinned the flyer at the top. Stepped back. "You'll need to work the right hook," he said. "Felix says the same thing." "Felix is right." She smiled and went back to her textbook. They closed at 6. Daniel turned off the overhead light and the radio and checked the back door lock twice, the way he always did. Amara waited by the front with her school bag. He did a last pass of the workbench tools in their places, components in their trays, the surface clear. His eyes moved to the shelf above the bench. At the far end of it, behind a box of spare capacitors and a coil of copper wire, a photograph leaned against the wall. It was not in a frame. It faced inward, the image pressed against the concrete, showing nothing but its white cardboard back. He looked at it for a moment. Then he turned off the light. Outside, Amara fell into step beside him. They walked the same route they always walked, down Brixton's main road and left at the filling station, and then 3 blocks through the residential streets where the jacaranda trees were beginning to show purple at their tips. The evening was warm. A dog barked somewhere and stopped. "Dad," Amara said. What's the photograph of?" "The one on the shelf." The question landed without urgency, the way she asked most things, direct, unhurried, without the performance of curiosity. "Nothing," he said. She walked another half a block beside him. "Okay," she said. She did not ask again, but when they reached home and he unlocked the front door and the light came on in the hallway, she was quiet in a way that was different from her usual quiet. The photograph stayed where it was, facing the wall. It had faced the wall for 11 years. The hotel was a different world. Daniel had known it would be before they arrived. He had ironed his best shirt twice that morning, and it was still the wrong kind of shirt. The jacket he wore over it was clean and dark and 7 years old. Amara had put on her good dress without being asked, deep blue, with small white buttons at the collar, and she had done her own hair, which she wore natural and high. She looked beautiful. She looked like she belonged anywhere. He followed her through the lobby, past the marble floors and the tall flower arrangements and the soft hotel smell of something expensive burning in a dish he couldn't name. The ballroom doors were open. Inside, chandeliers threw warm light across tables set with white linen and tall glasses, men in suits, women in formal dresses. The particular sound of a room full of people who had never had to worry about a tournament entry fee. Laughter that came easy. Conversation that had no sharp edges. A hotel staff member checked their names and directed them to their table. It was near the far edge of the room, behind a row of round tables where sponsors and city officials sat. Daniel pulled out Amara's chair and then his own. He did not look around to see if anyone had noticed them arrive. Amara looked around enough for both of them. "She's there," Amara said quietly, tipping her chin toward the front. the one in red. Serena Harlan stood near the stage in a dress the color of embers, speaking to two men in blazers. She moved through the conversation the way she moved through everything efficiently, without waste. Each gesture contained a decision. Daniel poured water from the table jug. He did not look at Serena Harlan. The program began at 8. A master of ceremonies in a white tuxedo worked through the evening's awards with practiced energy. Youth athletes were called to the stage one by one: swimmers, sprinters, gymnasts, each receiving a small trophy and a round of applause. When they called Amara's name, she stood up straight and walked to the stage without any visible nervousness. Daniel watched her cross the room. She shook the MC's hand, took the trophy, and smiled for the photographer. The applause was genuine and warm. She came back to the table and set the trophy on the white linen and looked at it the way she looked at things she had worked for, with satisfaction, not triumph. "Good," Daniel said. "I know," she said. Then she smiled. The program continued. Speeches were made about the youth circuit's growth and Harlan Academy's commitment to developing the next generation of South African athletes. Serena spoke for 5 minutes without notes, fluent and controlled, and the room gave her its full attention. She thanked the sponsors by name and the city officials by title, and the young athletes last. In a certain light, it sounded like generosity. Daniel drank his water. He noticed the two boys at the head table, large for their ages, dressed in blazers, sitting the way boys sit when they've been told to sit still. One watched the room with a flat, measuring expression. The other kept his eyes on the table. Serena's sons. He had seen them at a circuit tournament 2 months back, standing apart from the other families while Serena worked the room. The program ended at 9:30. Tables began to break into smaller conversations. Waitstaff moved through the room with dessert plates and coffee. Daniel was thinking about the walk to the car, about whether Amara needed to be up early for school, about nothing in particular, when he became aware of someone approaching the table. He knew before he looked up. Serena Harlan crossed the room without hurrying. The people near her path shifted slightly, the way people do around someone who does not slow down for others. She reached their table and sat not at the empty seat beside Amara, but directly across from Daniel. She set a folded document on the table between them. It was printed on heavy paper and bound at the top with a black clip. "Mr. Osei," she said, not loudly, but not quietly either. The kind of volume that carries to adjacent tables without appearing to try. She looked at him the way she had looked at the room all evening, assessing, categorizing, deciding. "I've thought carefully about this," she said, "and I believe we can help each other. I need a strong father for my sons, and you need money." She touched the document lightly with one finger. "I think what I'm offering is fair to both of us." The table nearby went quiet. 4 feet away, a man in a gray jacket stopped moving his wine glass toward his mouth. Amara's hands, folded on the table, went completely still. The document sat between them. Numbered pages. Printed terms. A figure near the bottom that Daniel could see from where he sat. It was a generous figure by any measure. It was also, in every way that mattered, a price tag. Daniel looked at the document for a moment. Then he folded it along its original crease, carefully, and placed it back in front of her. "No, thank you," he said. He stood. He held out his hand to Amara. She took it without hesitation and picked up her trophy with the other hand. They walked toward the ballroom doors through a room that had found something else to be very quiet about. Outside, the night air was cool. The hotel's entrance lights cast long shadows across the pavement. Amara walked beside him until they reached the edge of the light. "Dad," she said, "are you okay?" "Yes," he said. She looked at his hands. He was holding her hand with his right one. His left hung at his side. It was shaking slightly. Just slightly. Just slightly. She saw it. She didn't say anything more, but she didn't look away either. He waited until the apartment was quiet. Amara had gone to bed without being asked, which meant she was tired, or thinking, or both. She had said good night from the hallway and not lingered. Daniel had listened to her move through her routine bathroom, bedroom, the small creak of her mattress, and then the apartment had gone still. He sat at the kitchen table for a while. The overhead light was on. A half-finished glass of water sat in front of him. He did not drink it. After some time, he got up and went to the shop. He did not turn on the main light. The street lamp outside pushed enough orange through the front window to see by. He moved between the workbench and the shelving unit, the way he always moved in this space, without looking, without hesitating, knowing every corner by years of use. He reached up to the high shelf, behind the box of spare capacitors, behind the coil of copper wire. His hand found the photograph. He carried it back to the kitchen and set it face up on the table under the light. He was 26 years old in it. That was the first thing that always struck him, how young. The man in the photograph had a different quality to him. Not harder, exactly. Fuller, like someone who had not yet learned that the world could empty you out in a single night. The belt was across his shoulder. His fists were raised. The crowd behind him was a blur of light and noise and open mouths. He could still hear it if he let himself, the roar that hit you like a physical thing, that went through your chest before it reached your ears. He had loved it once. He let himself go back. The training camps had been in Lagos, mostly, in a long concrete building that smelled of sweat and rubber matting and the particular iron smell of men who pushed themselves past what was comfortable into what was necessary. He had spent 5 years there. His coach, a lean, exacting man named Ayo, had told him in his first week that talent was just the entry fee, that the ones who lasted were the ones who could be uncomfortable without becoming afraid. Daniel had been good at that. He had always been good at stillness under pressure, at letting the opponent come to him, at waiting. The title fight had been in Johannesburg. He had flown in 2 weeks early so Yemi could be there. She was 7 months along, and she had sat ringside in a blue dress with her hands folded over her stomach, and she had watched every round without looking away. Afterward, when they put the belt on him, he had looked for her face first, before the cameras, before anything. She had been laughing. He brought himself back. He brought himself back because the next part was the part he could only hold for a short time before it became too heavy. The hospital had been 3 weeks later. A complication that came without warning, the way the worst things do. He had been in the locker room when his phone rang. He had still been in his corner wraps from the morning's training session. He had driven to the hospital with the wraps still on his hands because he forgot to take them off, and there was no time, and then there was no reason to think about it at all. Yemi died at 4 in the morning. The baby lived. He had sat in a corridor outside the maternity ward in fight clothes, holding a newborn girl wrapped in a white cloth. And he had looked at her face, the closed eyes, the small working mouth, the fingers curled against her cheek, and he had understood, with a clarity that required no thought, that the man he had been before that corridor no longer existed. He had called Ayo from that corridor. He had said, "I'm done." Ayo had been quiet for a long time, and then he had said, "I know." That was all. The belt was still in the locker when he cleaned out his things. He left it there. He did not know who found it eventually, and he had never tried to find out. He had come to Johannesburg because it was where the fight had been, where Yemi had laughed in a blue dress. It made a kind of sense that required no explanation. He opened the repair shop 18 months later. He had never told anyone, not the landlord, not Felix, not the parents at Amara's school who made small talk at the gate. He was Daniel. He fixed things. That was enough. Now he sat at the kitchen table and looked at the photograph and thought about a woman in a red dress who had looked at him across a white linen tablecloth and seen something to be acquired. He turned to the photograph face down. Then he carried it back to the shelf, pressed it against the wall, and replaced the box of capacitors in front of it. He checked on Amara. She was asleep on her side, one arm stretched toward the edge of the mattress, her face soft and open in the way it only was when she was completely under. She had her mother's cheekbones. She had always had them from the first day, and she always would. He pulled her door almost closed and went back to the kitchen. His phone was on the table. He picked it up to set it on the charger by the window. The screen showed one missed call. An unknown number. The call had come in while he was in the shop, while he was holding the photograph. He looked at it for a moment. He set the phone on the charger without calling back. But he did not sleep for a long time after that. The email came 4 days after the gala. Felix Banda sent it at 7 in the morning, which was unusual. Felix was a gym man, not a desk man. He communicated in person or not at all, and his messages were rarely more than a few words. This one was 3 sentences long. He had received a notification from the Youth Circuit Administration Office. Amara's regional tournament entry had been flagged for review. No reason was given. Daniel read it at the workbench with his first cup of tea cooling beside him. He read it twice. Then he set his phone down and finished the repair he had started the night before, a ceiling fan motor, the third one that week, and let himself think. The tournament was 6 weeks out. There was time. Flags got cleared. Paperwork got sorted. These things happened for administrative reasons that had nothing to do with anything. He told himself this and mostly believed it. Felix called that afternoon. "I went in," he said. "Spoke to someone at the office on Commissioner Street." "What did they say?" "That the gym's partnership status is under review." Those were the exact words. Under review. Felix paused. "They couldn't tell me why. Or they wouldn't. Hard to say which." Daniel was quiet. "There's a board member," Felix said. "Raymond Steele. He handles the partnership agreements. I asked to speak with him. They said he was in a meeting." "Which meeting?" Another pause. "With someone from Harlan Academy. An assistant, apparently, not Harlan herself." The ceiling fan motor sat on the bench in front of Daniel. He looked at it without seeing it. "Okay," he said. "Daniel, I heard you." He ended the call and went back to work. The gym smelled of chalk and old leather and the particular sharpness of rope that had absorbed years of sweat. Felix ran it the way Daniel ran his shop, with minimal decoration and maximum function. The bags were worn, but solid. The matting was clean. On the walls, hand-lettered signs listed the rules and the training schedule in large, clear print. Amara trained there 3 afternoons a week. Daniel came to pick her up when he could close the shop in time. On those afternoons, he sat on the wooden bench along the back wall and watched her work the footwork, the combinations, the way she moved her head, which she had gotten better at over the past year. He did not try to coach her. That was Felix's job, but he watched. The way he always watched, quietly, completely, missing nothing. The following morning, Daniel drove to the Circuit Administration Office on Commissioner Street. It was a plain building, narrow hallway, fluorescent lights, a reception desk behind a glass panel. He gave his name and asked for Raymond Steele. The receptionist checked her screen. Checked it again. "Mr. Steele is unavailable today," she said. "Is he in the building?" A brief hesitation. "He's not available for walk-ins. You can submit a query through the online portal." Daniel thanked her and left. He sat in his car outside for a moment. The street was busy with mid-morning traffic. A vendor sold fruit from a cart on the corner, calling out prices in a rhythm that rose and fell with the passing cars. Daniel watched him work for a moment, then started the engine. That evening, Amara was in the kitchen doing homework when his phone rang. It was Felix. Daniel stepped into the hallway to answer it, pulling the door to the kitchen almost but not completely closed. Felix had more information. Steele had apparently confirmed the review in a brief email to the gym, vague language, standard phrasing, no timeline. Felix read the keyline aloud. It said the review was related to partnership alignment and program eligibility criteria. "What does that mean?" Daniel said. It means nothing, Felix said. It's the kind of sentence that means nothing, so it can mean anything. Daniel leaned against the hallway wall. The kitchen light was on. He could see the edge of Amara's textbook through the gap in the door. We should talk about next steps, Felix said. If the flag isn't lifted in the next 2 weeks, we may need to look at entering through a different circuit. It'll cost more and the competition level is lower, but she can still compete. Let's see what the week brings. Daniel. Felix's voice was careful. You know what this is. I know what it looks like. He ended the call, stood in the hallway for a moment, then pushed the kitchen door open. Amara was looking at him. She had her pen in her hand and her textbook open, but she had not been reading it. Her eyes moved from the phone in his hand to his face. "Was that Felix?" she said. "Yes. Is it about my entry?" He sat down across from her. "There's a delay with the paperwork. Felix is sorting it out." She looked at him steadily. "Is it because of the gala?" He held her gaze. "I don't know." She said nothing, just kept looking at him with that flat, patient expression, the one she had inherited from him, the one that said she had already formed her own conclusion and was giving him the courtesy of a response. He did not have a better answer to give her. The envelope arrived the next morning. A courier in a Santon livery brought it to the shop just after 9, asked Daniel to sign for it, and left without a word. No return address, no cover letter inside, just a printed document, identical in format to the one Serena had placed on the table at the gala, except the figures on this one were higher. Substantially higher. Daniel read it once, all the way through. Then he carried it to the alley behind the shop, where he kept a small metal bin for waste material from repairs. He dropped the document in and lit a match. He watched it burn until there was nothing left but gray curl. The revised terms had been generous enough to tell him one thing clearly. Serena Harlan had expected him to reconsider. She had not yet understood that the answer would not change. 2 weeks after the gala, Kofi Harlan walked into the repair shop at 3:20 on a Tuesday afternoon. He did not knock. The door was open, the way it always was during business hours. He came in, looked around once at the shelves and the workbench and the transistor radio murmuring in the corner, and sat down in the plastic chair near the door, the one Daniel kept for waiting customers. He did not say why he was there. He did not say anything at all. Daniel was midway through rewiring a table lamp. He glanced up when the boy came in, registered who it was, and looked back down at the lamp. He kept working. After a while, Kofi shifted in the chair. He watched Daniel's hands, the way the wire was stripped and connected, the way each step followed the last with no wasted motion. His eyes were attentive in the way that had nothing to do with lamps, and everything to do with a boy who had spent years watching people and deciding they were not worth watching. He came back the next day. This time, Jabari was with him. Jabari was 2 years younger and built differently, softer around the edges, with a quality of stillness that looked less like calm and more like a door held very carefully shut. He sat on the floor near the back counter, back against the wall, and took out his phone. He did not look at it. He held it in his hands the way people hold things when they need something to hold. Daniel did not ask why they were there. He did not offer an explanation for his silence either. He simply worked, and they simply stayed, and by the end of that week it had become its own kind of arrangement. Amara adjusted without discussion. On the second day she nodded at Jabari the way she nodded at people she was willing to share space with. On the third day she moved her homework to the back counter and spread it out with the particular authority of someone who has decided a space is partly hers. Jabari shifted to make room without being asked. Within a few days they were doing homework in parallel, not talking much, but occasionally pushing a pencil or a rubber across the counter between them, with the easy shorthand of children who have found a workable rhythm. On Thursday, Kofi spoke for the first time. He was watching Daniel replace the capacitor in a small kitchen radio, and he waited until Daniel set down the soldering iron before he set it. "How do you know which part is broken?" Daniel picked up the radio and turned it over in his hands. "You test each part. You start with the most likely problem and work outward." Kofi looked at the radio. "What if you test everything and it's still broken?" "Then you missed something," Daniel said. "Go back to the beginning." Kofi was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded a single deliberate nod, as if this answer had application beyond the radio. The following afternoon, Daniel cleared a small space in the back area of the shop and showed Amara a footwork drill she had been struggling with at the gym, just the basic pattern: weight shift, pivot, reset. He walked through it slowly at first, then at half speed, then let her try. She got it wrong 3 times. On the 4th, she found it. Kofi stood in the doorway between the front and back of the shop. He did not step onto the cleared space. He did not ask to join. He just stood with his arms crossed and watched. And something in his face, some tightness around the jaw, eased a fraction. Daniel noticed. He said nothing. His phone rang late that afternoon, after the boys had left and Amara was packing her school bag. He looked at the screen. Answered. Serena's voice was smooth and businesslike. She said she understood her sons had been spending time at his shop. She said she thought this showed they were receptive to the arrangement and that perhaps they could revisit the terms she had sent. Her tone was generous. It was the tone of someone describing a negotiation that was going the way they expected. "Your boys are welcome here," Daniel said. "That's all." A brief pause. "Mr. Osei, I think we both know this is more than—" "Goodbye, Miss Harlan." He ended the call, set the phone on the bench, went back to work. 3 days later, at 4:30 on a Friday, the shop door opened. Serena Harlan stood in the doorway. She wore a light jacket over office clothes, and even in the doorway of a Brixton repair shop she carried herself as though the room had been arranged around her. Her eyes moved across the space, the shelves, the workbench, the radio in the corner, and then stopped. Kofi and Jabari were at the back counter. Jabari was copying something from Amara's notebook. Kofi had a pencil in his hand and was actually using it, bent over a page in a way that made him look, for just a moment, like a much younger boy. Amara had not looked up. Serena's expression did not change, not precisely, but something behind it moved. Something that was not quite what Daniel would have called warm, and not quite what he would have called cold. Something that did not know what it was yet. "Boys," she said, "time to go." Jabari closed his notebook. He packed his bag with the speed of someone long practiced at quick exits. Amara moved her notebook back to her side of the counter without comment. Kofi did not move. 1 second, 2, 3. He was looking at his page. Not at his mother, not at Daniel, just at the page, and the pencil in his hand, and the work he had been doing. Then he closed the notebook, slid off the stool, and picked up his bag. He walked past Daniel without speaking. At the door, he paused just for a moment, just long enough to mean something, and then followed his mother out into the late afternoon street. The door swung closed behind them. Amara looked at the space where Kofi had been sitting. Then she looked at her father. Daniel was already back at the workbench, but his hands had gone still. Felix called at 7:15 in the evening. Daniel was at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold. Amara was in her room. He could hear the low sound of her radio through the wall, something with a slow beat, the kind of music she played when she was thinking rather than listening. He picked up on the second ring. Felix did not waste time. The circuit had sent official confirmation that afternoon. The gym's partnership status had been terminated, effective immediately, with the formal announcement scheduled for tomorrow's showcase event at Harlan Academy. The letter used the phrase routine restructuring. It said the decision was part of a broader program realignment. It did not mention Serena Harlan's name anywhere in its 4 paragraphs. It did not need to. "They'll announce it at the opening," Felix said. in front of the sponsors, the scouts, everyone. Daniel said nothing. "It's designed to look like we failed some kind of review," Felix said. "Not that we were pushed. People won't know the difference." The radio in Amara's room had gone quiet. "Daniel." Felix's voice dropped. "I don't know what we do after this. If we're out of the circuit, Amara's regional entry is finished. The other kids too. All of them." "I know." "So what do we do?" Daniel looked at the wall across from him. "I'll call you in the morning." He set the phone down. The kitchen was very still. The overhead light was the only one on in the apartment, and it made the room feel smaller than it was. The scratched table, the two chairs, the shelf on the far wall with its rows of small objects he had accumulated over 11 years of this life. Spare parts. A child's drawing in a clip frame, a small cactus Amara had bought at a school fair and named Gerald, and at the far end of the shelf, behind a box of spare capacitors and a coil of wire, the photograph. Facing the wall. He heard her chair scrape. Amara came into the kitchen in her socks and her school tracksuit, her hair loose around her shoulders. She had heard enough. He could see it in the set of her face. Not upset, not frightened, just clear. The way she got when she had already processed something and arrived at a position. She sat down across from him. For a moment neither of them spoke. The tap in the kitchen dripped once, twice, and then stopped. Her eyes moved to the shelf, to the photograph, facing its wall. She looked at it for a long time. Then she looked back at him. "Hiding doesn't protect me," she said. "It just teaches me that who we are is something to be ashamed of." She said it simply, not as an accusation. The way she said most things, direct, without decoration, as if she were describing something obvious that had somehow gone unnoticed. Daniel looked at his daughter. She had her mother's cheekbones. She had his stillness when she was thinking, and she had something neither of them had given her, some clarity that was entirely her own, earned in the particular way that children earn things when they grow up watching a parent carry something heavy and never set it down. He did not answer her. Not with words. He got up from the table. He crossed to the shelf. He moved the box of capacitors aside and the coil of wire, and he took the photograph in both hands and turned it to face the room. The younger version of himself looked out from the image with the belt across his shoulder and the crowd behind him and the particular expression of a man who did not yet know what the next 3 weeks would cost him. Daniel set the photograph back on the shelf, facing out, and returned to the table. Amara looked at the photograph, then at her father. She did not say anything else. She did not need to. She got up, went to the cupboard, and put the kettle on for fresh tea. They sat together until it was late, not talking much, the way they did on evenings when the most important thing had already been said. He did not sleep well. But by 5 in the morning he was dressed and his phone was in his hand, and he called Felix before the street outside had fully come to light. "I'm coming to the showcase," he said. A pause. "Daniel, I'll be there." He ended the call and stood in the kitchen for a moment. Gerald the cactus sat on the shelf. The photograph faced outward. Outside, a car passed on the street below, its headlights sliding across the ceiling and gone. He reached up and carefully lifted the photograph from the shelf. It was lighter than it felt. It always was. He looked at it once, the crowd, the belt, the young man who had not yet learned what he would trade and why, and then he folded it along its length and slid it into the breast pocket of his jacket, against his chest. He checked on Amara. Still asleep. He left a note on the kitchen table, back by lunch. "Gerald needs water." Then he picked up his keys and went out into the cool morning, the photograph in his pocket, walking toward something he had spent 14 years walking away from. Harlan Academy sat behind high white walls in the northern suburbs, the kind of building that announced itself before you reached the entrance, all glass and clean lines, and the particular confidence of money that had never needed to apologize for itself. Daniel arrived with Felix at 9:15. The main training facility was already filling. Rows of chairs had been arranged facing a central mat area, and the chairs were taken by people in pressed clothes, sponsors with lanyards, regional scouts with notebooks, school directors who recognized each other and said so loudly. At the far end of the room, a raised platform held a lectern and a banner bearing the Harlan Academy crest. Amara had insisted on coming. Daniel had told her no twice. The third time she had looked at him across the kitchen table and said, "You put the photograph in your pocket. I'm coming." He had not argued after that. She sat now in the third row of chairs with Felix on one side and an empty seat on her other, her school bag between her feet, watching the room fill with the calm attention of someone who has decided to pay close attention to everything. Marcus Dubé stood near the back wall with a press lanyard and a phone he kept checking. He had not spoken to Daniel. He did not need to. His article would publish in 2 hours. Whatever happened in this room, the piece would exist regardless. The morning light came through the high windows on the east side of the facility, falling in long, pale rectangles across the matting. The air smelled of rubber and floor polish and the particular cleanness of a space maintained for appearance as much as use. Serena Harlan took the lectern at 9:30 exactly. She wore a charcoal jacket and spoke without notes. She thanked the sponsors by name. She welcomed the scouts. She described the Academy's commitment to developing sporting excellence across Johannesburg and acknowledged the youth circuit's role in that work. Her voice was steady and warm and carried to every corner of the room without effort. Then she said that as part of the Academy's strategic realignment of its community partnerships, several circuit relationships would be restructured to better reflect current program priorities. She named 3 gyms. Felix's gym was the second one she named. She framed it as a natural evolution. She said these decisions were made with the athlete's development in mind. She did not look at Daniel when she said it. She did not need to. Felix's jaw tightened beside him. Daniel kept his eyes on Serena and his hands loose in his lap. The announcement took 40 seconds. Then she moved on to the showcase schedule and the room shifted with her. The way rooms shifted when Serena Harlan decided a topic was finished. The showcase proceeded through its program. Sprinters ran timed drills on the outdoor track and the results were read aloud. Swimmers were represented by recorded times and brief video. 3 gymnasts performed on the mat area to polite and genuine applause. A young boxer from the Academy's own program shadow-boxed for 2 minutes while a scout made notes. Daniel watched all of it. The photograph was in his breast pocket. He was aware of it the way you are aware of something pressed against your chest. Not uncomfortable, just present. Bongani Dubé came to the mat after the boxers. He was broad through the shoulders, maybe 35, with the composed bearing of someone who had spent years earning the right to take up space. He had been introduced earlier as the Academy's head combat instructor and a former national middleweight champion. He moved onto the mat and addressed the room with the ease of someone who had done this before. He said that each year at the showcase he offered an open demonstration any willing participant from the floor, a chance to see the kind of training the Academy's instructors brought to their athletes. He said it was friendly. He said it was instructive. He smiled when he said it, and the smile was genuine and entirely confident. The room waited. People glanced at each other. A scout looked at his notebook. One of the school directors leaned back in his chair. Daniel stood up. The movement was quiet. No announcement, no preparation. He simply got to his feet, the way he got to his feet when a customer came into the shop, one motion, complete, unhurried. Serena saw him. Her expression moved through surprise in less than a second, and what replaced it was something close to amusement. The repairman from Brixton, in his work shirt. She settled back slightly, as if what was about to happen confirmed something she had already decided. Felix looked at the floor, not from shame, from the particular expression of someone who already knows the ending of a story and is waiting for the rest of the room to catch up. Amara did not move. She sat straight in her chair with her hands in her lap and her eyes on her father as he walked to the edge of the mat and removed his jacket, folded it once, and set it on the nearest chair. He rolled his sleeves to the elbow. Bongani watched him approach with the attentive neutrality of a professional assessing without dismissing, patient without being polite. Daniel stepped onto the mat. He and Bongani stood 8 feet apart. The room, which had been maintaining a low hum of conversation through most of the morning, went quiet, the way rooms go quiet when something unscheduled is happening and no one yet knows what kind of thing it is. Amara did not look away. 3 days after the showcase, Felix received an email. No cover letter, no explanation. Just a single paragraph from the Youth Circuit Administration office stating that the partnership review had concluded and that the gym's status had been restored, effective immediately. The language was identical in tone to the letter that had removed it. Routine. Administrative. Final. Felix called Daniel to read it aloud. When he finished, there was a short silence. Amara's regional entry, Daniel said. Reinstated, Felix said. I already checked. Daniel set the phone down and went back to the motor he was rewiring. Outside, the Brixton street carried its usual mid-morning sounds. A truck reversing, someone calling out a price, a dog making its opinion known about something 2 blocks away. The shop smelled of solder and the particular warmth of a small space in morning sun. He worked until lunchtime. Then a customer came in with a blender, and he worked on that too. Serena Harlan arrived on a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after the showcase. No assistant, no driver waiting at the curb. Or if there was, Daniel did not see one. She came through the shop door in a dark coat, her hair back, and she stood near the entrance and waited. Daniel was finishing with a customer. He carried the repaired radio to the counter, wrote the receipt, took payment, and saw the customer out. Then he turned. Serena was still standing by the door. She had not moved toward the counter. She had not picked up anything to examine or checked her phone or done any of the things people do when they are waiting and want to appear comfortable. She had simply stood and waited, the way someone stands when they have decided to do something difficult and do not want to give themselves the opportunity to change their mind. The shop was quiet. The radio on the shelf played something low and instrumental. She looked at him. He looked at her. Then she said something brief, unrehearsed. The particular quality of words chosen slowly and without the architecture of an offer or a strategy behind them, words that arrived without a document to back them up or a clause to protect the person saying them. What she said was between her and Daniel. His expression did not close. It did not soften easily either. It did the thing that honest expressions do when something true and unexpected lands. It held very still for a moment, and then it settled into something that was not quite forgiveness and not quite acknowledgement, but was somewhere between the two, in the space where people stand when they are deciding what kind of person they want to be going forward. He nodded once. She left. A WFC official named Erasmus called the following week. He had seen Marcus Dubie's article, which by that point had been shared widely enough to reach people who had not thought about Daniel Osei in over a decade. Erasmus had known Daniel when he was fighting. He was careful on the phone, respectful of the silence Daniel had chosen, curious about what had changed. He asked if Daniel had any interest in a return to the sport in any capacity. He mentioned exhibition events, mentorship programs, an advisory role on athlete development. Daniel thanked him. He said no to a return. He said he would think about the advisory role. After 3 days, he called back and said yes to one thing, a coaching consultation, 3 mornings a week at Felix's gym. Not the WFC, not a television program or a public announcement. Just the gym. Just the mornings. Felix had a small placard made and put it by the door. It said, Daniel Osei, coaching, nothing else. Felix had offered to add more. Daniel had said that was enough. The months that followed had their own rhythm. The shop opened before dawn, as it always had. The mornings at the gym were early and physical, and honest young fighters learning to be uncomfortable without becoming afraid, the way Io had once taught Daniel, the way Daniel now passed it forward without ceremony. Amara competed at regional level in the spring and placed second, which she accepted with a flat nod that was pure Daniel and a laugh afterward that was pure Yemi. Kofi and Jabari still came to the shop. Not every week, not on any schedule. They showed up the way they always had, without announcement, without explanation, and sat and worked and left when they were ready. Nobody had named what it was. It did not need a name to be real. On the shelf above Daniel's workbench, between a box of capacitors and the small cactus Amara had named Gerald, the photograph now faced the room. The young man in it, with the belt across his shoulder and the crowd behind him, looked out at the shop, at the tools in their rows, the worn surface of the bench, the corkboard with its tournament flyers and receipts, and one hand-drawn map of Brixton streets. He did not look like a different person anymore. He looked like the beginning of the same one. 4 months after the showcase, on a Tuesday morning in early autumn, Daniel and Amara walked home from the gym along the same route they had always walked. The jacaranda trees on the residential streets were shedding the last of their purple. The air was cool and carried the smell of it, that particular clean smell of a Johannesburg morning that still had some chill in it before the day warmed through. They walked without talking. They did not need to. After a while, without looking up from the pavement in front of her, Amara reached over and took his hand. He let her. A man who has truly loved and truly lost cannot be purchased. He already knows the only things worth having are the ones that cannot be priced. He knows it the way he knows the weight of a newborn daughter in fight clothes in a hospital corridor at 4 in the morning. He knows it the way he knows the sound of a crowd going quiet when something real is happening. He knows it in his hands, and in the photograph that now faces outward, and in the small, warm pressure of a child's hand finding his on a Tuesday morning, in the city he chose, in the life he built, in everything he refused to sell.